Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hospitality TV. I am your host, Rafael Peterson. Thank you so much for joining us. If today is your first time tuning in, this is a channel that was created for everyone in the hospitality industry that's connected to it one way or another, and for us to interview leaders in that industry so that they can share their insights and lessons that they learned throughout their careers so we can learn from them and we can all be better. We have a very special guest in-house today. Before I get to that, I do want to say one thing. I have created this because of my time in the industry and everything that it's given to me. So we're trying to provide as much value as we can to everybody that's listening to it. I do want to say and just ask that if it provides you any value whatsoever, please share the show. That's going to help us grow. It helps us get better guests. It helps us spread awareness about what we're doing. Share the show. You can share it on your stories. You can share an episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that good stuff. But so for today, very excited to have a good friend, Chris Wood, in house. How are you doing today, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for your patience for helping us get set up here. And new spot for us, so we're excited.
Of course. Happy to be
man.
here.
Cool, man. So you and I worked together under the Consortium Holdings Group. You were the general manager at Ironside. You, to me, were always one of those guys that people kind of gravitate towards, and you always had this very kind of warm, charismatic character, and that's one of the things that stood out the most for me. I feel like that's something that you can't really teach, and maybe we can talk about that too. You know who reminds me of that too is Brian Prugali dad. I think you know him. He's just like a super cool, charismatic character, and people are just like naturally attracted to him because that's kind of the vibe that you give off, So I think naturally because of that, everybody around town kind of knows you and kind of respects your position is what you've been doing. But as far as I know, currently director of operations for the Trust Group.
Yeah, more of a regional operations manager.
I'm sorry.
Director of operations, right-hand man, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And that oversees how many restaurants?
3 restaurants, technically, and 2
Which ones are those?
shops. Trust,
Yep.
which is a flagship, which has been around about 8 years.
Gotcha.
Then Fort Oak in Mission Hills, and Cardellino, our Italian chop house, which we just revamped about a year ago. And then I manage 2 butcher shops called the Wise Ox. There's one in El Cajon, and then there's one in Carlsbad in the Beacon.
Very cool.
Yeah. Keeps me busy.
Oh my God, I bet. I was going to say, where can people find you if they wanted to pop into the bar and say hello, or is that kind of just all over the place?
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
One day I might be at Cardellino for service. One day I might be at Trust. Technically, right now I'm acting GM at Trust in particular, so I'm there the most, and then
Gotcha.
I kind of bounce around a little bit depending on how my day looks.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah. So one of the things I love about this whole thing is I get to actually sit down and have some time to talk to the homies and kind of get their background story. I feel like a lot of times you meet people, you don't really get to dig in a lot, which is what I really like to do. And So, man, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about, maybe give us some background on your career, kind of how you got into the hospitality industry, and we'll go from there.
For sure. We can start from the beginning, actually. So in high school, I worked in a lot of grocery stores, which kind of translate to this a little bit. I worked in a couple, like as a cashier, stocker, things of that nature. And then eventually went to college at University of Maryland, College Park. And then I was in pretty good shape back then. I played football all my life, so I became a doorman or a bouncer, should you say,
all right.
at a college bar. A very fun start to my career.
Oh, my God.
But
you have some good stories from that, too.
Yeah. I could write a couple of books, honestly. I actually thought about doing that. So I worked at a bar in College Park called the Cornerstone Grill and Loft. Started as a bouncer, worked my way up, busser, worked in the kitchen a little bit as a dishwasher just to help out. Then after busser, became bar back, started to get familiar with the bar, loved being a bartender, obviously being very social, building my network, meeting a lot of people. Bartending just came naturally to me. So as I was bar back and I started to bartend, when the bartenders would get weeded, they'd be, hey, Chris, make these cocktails in the service well real quick. So started to pick that up a little bit. Then eventually became bartended for about 8.5 years, and then became manager. So basically I was a beverage manager and a security manager, essentially an AGM of a college bar. Then at that point I was living with my GM, so he was my mentor. About 10.5 years later, he was like, you got to get the hell out of here. This is not for you. You're way better than this. So I started working in DC at a place called Monster 14 under Richard Sandoval, which he has restaurants all over the world.
Did you move out there for that job, or did you have any friends out there, or what?
So DC, Maryland was in an area they call the DMV, so it's pretty close to each other.
Okay, gotcha.
So essentially, College Park is on the outskirts of DC, and then where I worked was about 20 minutes inside of DC.
Okay, gotcha.
So not that far away. I still ended up living with my mentor, my GM at the time, and then I was the AGM at Monster 14. It was a 2-floor Asian Latin tapas restaurant, and it actually turned into a nightclub. after dinner service. So that was pretty interesting. So we
Kinda
had
born and raised, right?
Yeah. So full service dinner, and then at a certain point in time, there were stanchions put up, and then there were some Serbian security guards that just showed up in black suits, and you're like, oh, it's party time. So it was a very interesting start into like getting to bigger companies.
Yeah.
Then essentially, there was a gentleman called Chris. His name's Chris Mears. He's the executive vice president of Let Us Entertain You Restaurants, which is based out of Chicago, and he's a big partner in that group. He had dinner at Masa 14 randomly, and then he contacted me. I can't remember how he contacted me. I think it might have been via LinkedIn or something. And he's like, I really want you to come meet with me. I'm only in town for a couple of days. Long story short, I met with him at a restaurant called Summer House Santa Monica in Stella Bar Pizzeria in North Bethesda. It was a pretty newer concept. It's a dual concept. So a pizzeria right beside a American modern cuisine restaurant. Like Stella Bar is very dark, like a pizza pub. And then Summer House Santa Monica is very bright, plants, living plants everywhere. And it also had a bakery inside of it. So I was the number 2, which is essentially the AGM for that group. So I worked for them for quite a bit sometime. Then I was looking to move up a little bit, and they were like, where do you want to go? I was like, I'd love to move to the West Coast to be closer to my family because my brother lives out here.
Wait, hold on. Sorry to interrupt. What were you doing with Let Us Entertain You? Because that's like a very big group,
Oh, yeah.
right? I mean,
huge,
those guys,
huge group. I mean, they have over, if I correct me if I'm wrong, probably 150 concepts now.
Yeah. We were looking that up earlier.
Yeah, all over the U.S. So they're based out of Chicago. They're basically the mob there, you should say.
Yeah.
Like you go in Lincoln Park and both sides of the street are all lettuce, but they're different concepts. You don't realize they're part of the same company. And so they have restaurants all over Minnesota, Arizona, Vegas, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and then L.A. So essentially, Chris and Corey, he's a partner as well, they were like, hey, let's move you to Santa Monica. And I was like, awesome, let's do it. And they were like, how long do you need? And I was like, whatever you need. So basically, 2 weeks later, I think it was 2-3 weeks later, they're like, you're going. And I was like, wow. Luckily at that time I wasn't part of a lease. I was just living with my friend.
Right.
And I was like, eventually I'm going to move no matter what. So hopefully I can move with the company, so don't have to pay for it because that would have been a huge financial responsibility. So eventually moved with them. I was flying around for a little bit. I was flying back and forth from Maryland to LA for a little bit just because they still needed my help there. Basically came in to help out the Santa Monica restaurants because they were going a little bit downhill. Obviously, California market is a little bit different just with actresses and actors and writers and comedians and such. So the first day I landed in Santa Monica, I was standing at the Meridian Delfina, about a block and a half away from the restaurant. I had 7 call-outs on my first day. So I was on the ground running on the first day. No one had no idea who I was except for the managers on site. So worked for that company for about 3 years or so, and then eventually got approached by a gentleman that is part of the group I work for now, and he hired me for my first GM position. That was at Herringbone, Santa Monica, which is essentially 2 blocks away from M Street Kitchen and Stella Bar, where I was in Santa Monica.
Yep.
And then worked for Herringbone for almost a little over a year and a half.
Were they pissed that you left? That's
no.
pretty close. That's still close in the neighborhood too.
Yeah, I mean, but they knew it.
Yeah.
It was more of longevity for me, and like at what point was I going to be a GM? I mean, at that point, I'd already been in the restaurant industry over 12 years. So I was like, if I'm not a GM at this point, what am I doing? So
yeah, but you left on good terms.
Left on good terms. Yeah. Great. I honestly talked to Corey, which is my old director. I talk to him frequently. I'll say at least once a month, just to get some insight, advice, and some mentorship a little bit there. And he'll text me too. He's like, hey, how are you doing out there? How are things going? I see you got your hands full, so hope that's going pretty well for you.
Yeah.
So after Herringbone, actually got in contact with CH. So a man named John Francesi, he contacted me. I actually had an interview like while I was at the restaurant on my phone outside of the restaurant during brunch service. And basically he was like, when's your next day off? And that was Saturday. I was like, tomorrow. And so he was like, come on down. And I interviewed with him in our salon at the office at like 7 o'clock at night. Then I went to dinner at Ironside that night and kind of gave him a summary of my experience and basically like a shopper report. Yeah. Shot an email to him and they sent me an offer and I moved down as soon as I could. So nice. I think I moved down in like a month and stayed with my brother at the time. Then after that, obviously COVID happened. So I moved to San Diego December 2019. And then COVID happened March. So that was a big blow. Obviously coming down on Ironside was crazy busy, like breaking records sales wise, and me being new to the company, it felt great. Just the bustliness of San Diego and being in Little Italy. And then obviously COVID happened and we're the only concept to open up essentially after that. So I kind of had my pick of the litter of like employees grab employees from Falsetto, from Craft and Commerce, from Born, wherever I could scratch up some teams to help out.
That's so crazy, man. Yeah. I feel like I've known you way before COVID, because COVID was such a turbulent time. And you came to San Diego December 2019. Jeez, I thought you were here for way longer or before that. I want to ask you a couple of things. I mean, obviously we're getting to the COVID area and everything, but like before we talk about your current position of where you are and how you got, you're describing how you got there. I'd love to just quickly look at some of the areas that you were at. And like, I feel like people always have at least one really good takeaway from a time in their life and, specific to a job that they held or a position that they were in. Is there anything that maybe you can pick apart from those times that were like valuable lessons that, you wish you knew now, for example, or you were talking about example like for like how you left. I feel like that's such an important thing too, that a lot of people don't necessarily do that. Absolutely. I can say I've definitely been guilty of that in the past too, where I haven't left on the best terms, and we know now, especially it's way too small of an industry to do things like that. And look how it's benefited you. Like you left on very good terms, and you still have people there within that group that are mentors to you, right?
For sure.
Like maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never trying to burn any bridges, because you never know. You might need to go back to that person for a job. Say something happens, God forbid, and you might need to go back to that place, and it's all about like going to those people before you make that next move. Going to those people of power and be like, hey, what can I do to be better? Why haven't I been promoted? Is it just not the right fit? Am I not learned? Do I not know enough yet? And so I always try to recap with anyone that hire me, like, hey, I'm looking to move on to another opportunity. Is there something I can do to stay within the group? And the only reason I left Valletta Entertaining was because they wanted me to move back to Chicago to be a GM at one of the stores. And I was like, sunny San Diego, frigid Chicago, no, not happening. So they understood completely. They understood why I made that move, because they didn't have anything for me on the West Coast. And they only had 3 stores on the West Coast, and I was a number 2 for all of them already. So I never try to leave on bad terms whatsoever, because you never know when it comes back around.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Exactly. Okay, so sorry, go ahead. So now we're COVID era in San Diego.
COVID Ironside. Era. Yeah, Ironside closed down, and then basically we used that time to revamp all the training, the reference guides and such. Like most of my days, I would wake up super early, go on long walks and get my head straight, listen to some music, then get back to my house and pop up my laptop and just dig into the training. And obviously the training was intense. It was great because I kind of got thrown into it too. Coming from Santa Monica, I was like, hey, run this store that's doing second most revenue in the company. You don't really know much. So yeah, but it was pretty quickly. And then obviously after we reopened up, it was a lot of stress. Living in Louisville didn't help either. I lived 2 blocks away from the restaurant, so even if I had a day off, it wasn't really a day off. I would literally walk down the street and be like, hey, can I get a reservation tonight? And I'm like, I'm not even working.
Right.
I'm just trying to enjoy my day off. I'm going to go have a drink, or I'm going to go eat at a restaurant. So ended up getting contacted by the Trust Group through Chef Brad. And this is the same time when Chef Jason was leaving the company. So it kind of like, I guess, worked itself out. Brad was basically like, hey, I wouldn't even be approaching you if Jason was still around the company, because he respected him so much.
Right.
So I met with that team, and they were, what are you looking for? And I want to be a partner or director of operations eventually. And obviously they were expanding. I could tell they were expanding. And I was a huge fan of Fort Oak even before. Even when I had a day off at Ironside, which was few and far between, I would find myself at the bar at Fort Oak just chatting up with the crew there. So then joined that team pretty quickly. And then I was a GM at Fort Oak for about 9 to 10 months. And then Brad was like, are you ready? And I was like, yeah, I've been ready. So I found my replacement, trained her, and she took over that store. And then eventually I started to become the operation manager for the group. So now I manage 5 properties. So.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there. I want to focus in on a couple things, because what do you think? So you're in operations now, right? And I feel like everybody, in order to be a successful restaurateur or even a successful part of the leadership team, like you really need to understand the operations side, right? Correct. Which is something that we haven't done historically well. I'm more of a wine guy. I've always been more wine leaning. I've been a sommelier and wine director for several restaurants, and I feel like that is for sure an area when they give us the wine education in a lot of these institutions that they have failed us as far as building you into really understanding the business behind, at the bare minimum, even creating, managing, and developing a profitable wine program. Mm-hmm. A lot of people just come in like, you love wine, you're passionate, you want to buy these things, but then still somehow you're not making money, or they don't understand the business behind it. That's not helping anybody out. But even from that end, like just from a general manager side or even a bar lead side, just to understand those different facets, right? What do you think, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to move into operations, like from even, I don't know, like even from the beginning when you start to move up? Most people follow the same trajectory, right? Like, you got to start from somewhere. Yeah. I don't think we're really hiring people out of like an Ivy League school who knows business that come be a director of operations. Yeah. Like, you do the same thing, right? You work your way up. You're a back waiter into a captain. Maybe you're the lead captain. Guess what? You're part-time managing now, and you kind of slowly absorb these things. But if somebody wanted to be great at operations, what's the right way to approach that?
I say starting from the beginning and in any hourly position, trying to hone in and be the best at that position first, and then go from there. I think every position that I took on, whether it was being a doorman or a bartender, I always tried to be the best at it and have some sort of mentorship behind it too, because the next person behind you, if you can't make someone as good as you, then you're not doing your job correctly. So say I'm training an AGM, say I'm training a potential bartender. If I'm not making them as good as I am, then I can't move up. So my advice is always to be ready to move up, to take that next step, and also study and ask questions. You
said something there really quick. Yeah. Again, sorry to cut you off. You said if you're not making them as good as they can be, then you're not doing your job.
Correct.
That's really interesting, right? I mean, are people... Can you teach that? Because you're saying you need to be the best that you can in that position. I think a lot of times too, people are just trying to do a job, right? They come in, they want to get a paycheck, and can you teach that to people?
Well, there's certain people, there's outliers where people are dedicated to it, and there's people that are there just to do a job and make a buck and go home and relax and just be in and out the door and not be fully involved in it, but also pinpoint certain people that I know that are in it, and I can always tell. Yeah. Like, for instance, I have an expo, and she attends all the pre-shift meetings on purpose. She takes the quizzes with the servers and the bartenders because I know that she wants to move up. But I also know on the other end, there's people that just want to be there, clock in, clock out, and be done with it. Yeah. Not everyone's going to be that way, and you just got to figure out who that person is. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. You can always tell when someone has that drive or that work ethic, hands down.
Yeah, for sure. So who do you think has been the most influential person for you when it comes to operations? Who have you learned from the most?
I'd say there's a multitude of people. Corey Milner from Lettuce was huge. Okay. He was hard, like very hard nosed, but he also had a soft spot too. But he was like, you need to know the price of everything, basically. He's like, you need to know the price of that fork, you need to know the price of that piece of that plateware, and you need to know the price of a case of toilet paper. That's what means operations, because you know how much things cost, and you know that this type of trifold towel is going to cost this much, even though it might look better, and this one's going to cost this much. So knowing how to operate and how to staff appropriately for business levels and obviously sake of service and hospitality is a huge part of that as well. I think staffing is the hardest part always, but just in times like now, some people aren't involved in it like they should be.
How are you guys dealing with that now? Because that's a huge, I work in sales now, so one of the things I really enjoy about this job too is that I get to meet a bunch of people in the industry now too, which has always been one of the favorite parts for me, just like what we're doing right now. But I get to talk to a lot of people too, and that is the consistent theme. It's actually an anomaly, and I'll rarely hear it to where somebody's like, "Oh yeah, we're good, we're fully staffed, and we're ready to rock." I mean, everybody's like, we don't have the staff that we need. We're still looking, with such a big group now. How are you guys dealing with that?
We try to change our hiring style now. I know people look at resumes and say, like, this person's worked in restaurants 15 years. Is that always the right fit? Come to find out, it's not usually the right fit, because it's kind of teaching an old dog new tricks. It's kind of hard to mold that person in the ways that you want to run your restaurants and the way you operate. The way we operate could be completely different from other groups, and we definitely realize that, and we're pretty dialed in on the details, attention to details, and like, this glass should look like this plate should look like that type of deal, and this is how a plate setting should look, like setting the table essentially. And so I think I'd rather hire someone that's on the younger side, and so I can grow them and mold them to the way we want them to be. So
they haven't been tarnished by the industry yet.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't find myself. I hire somebody that's been in the industry quite some time. It's harder to teach them. Yeah. You tell them one thing and they do the opposite. So it's tough.
If you don't mind, and I don't know if you can share this or not, but maybe tell us a little bit more. Like, are there like a certain string of questions that you ask? Is it more personality? Like, what type of things do you look for in an interview?
I try to get to know the person.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if I'm going to get along with them, that's going to be a great step moving forward.
Yes.
Like, if I don't get along with someone initially in an interview, then why would I hire them?
Right, exactly.
They could have the best resume in the world. They could be a a lead som, they could be a master som, but if I don't get along with them socially, then that's not somebody I would hire.
Yeah. Okay, well, that makes sense.
Like, how would you handle this situation? Obviously, financials, benefits, things that we offer. Have you been to our restaurants? Like, have you done any background on us? If someone's like, I've never heard of your restaurants before, and I didn't do my due diligence, I'm like, so you just blindly applied on Indeed and just like,
right.
You're like, here's a GM position. Here's
they can't name the restaurants in the group, for example.
Yeah. So
what
are
you doing here?
So you're just like throwing darts,
right?
So do some research,
So what's your outlook right now, like on the field of the talent that's out there? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Because I'm not doing that these days. And you got your finger on the pulse as you're doing all these interviews?
I don't want to say it's getting worse. I just want to say people are asking a lot for what the job entails.
Yeah.
We kind of take a lot of the financial responsibilities off the in-store managers so they can operate the store efficiently and they're not so stressed in the middle of service. So, I have to do this liquor, beer, wine note, or I got to finish up this schedule right now. So like in my past life, that was more of the stress on me, where if I'm in the middle of a busy service from 11 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night and I have a deadline to send the schedule at 4 p.m. in the middle of service, it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's just not feasible and it's not attainable. So us on our side, we kind of take the ordering out of their hands, and that comes from the executive level. So they're basically very dialed on service and like the flow of service, and they're paying attention to the floor and not so much on their phones or on their computer.
Yeah. Another interesting thing for me is that it seems like the word on the street, and also from what you see, is that you guys have very good employee longevity. Mm-hmm. This doesn't seem like there's a lot of turnover.
Correct.
In the restaurants. I could be wrong. Obviously, I don't know all the restaurants.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys are dealing with, but that's what it seems like, and at least that's what the word on the street is like, which is always a great thing. And that always sparks a lot of interest in me, because it seems like there's a lot of turnover in general in restaurants, and I think when you see places that retain their employees very well, that's a great sign. Well, first of all, is that true? And second of all, what would you attribute that to?
It is true. It kind of like flip-flopped, honestly. Like in the past, it was more so the managers never left, and it was very smooth. But honestly, COVID changed a lot of people's outlook on the industry and like how tough it got and how skeleton of a crew that you had to run and what you had to do to actually weather the storm and stay relevant. Like GMs running an ice cream window, or GM hosting or working expo for service. So I think now more so, like our hourly staff members don't leave. The retention rate is great. But now what we're finding is that management is hard to keep around because either people want to do different things with their lives, they're over the service industry, or the hours are just too much.
Why do you think the hourly employees are sticking around?
I would say financially and the morality of our group is pretty high. Like I myself try to create a great culture and make sure the employees want to stay. I think that's a huge part of it too, but also financially it's great.
Yeah.
They make good money.
For sure.
And our hours of operation are different from most places too. So you got to think we're fully dinner focused at most of our concepts, 5 to 9 during the weekdays and 5 to 10 on the weekends. So I think that takes a lot of stressors off some of our hourly members.
Yes.
They literally come in an hour before the shift, get set up, and they're out the door within 7.5 hours, which goes a long way.
Yeah,
Where most places you're working 8 to 9, 10 hours shifts. So that's definitely huge. And your quality of life is terrible.
So on that note too, we're talking about 8, 9, 10-hour shifts. I something that's always been a thought of mine that's been crazy, and I want to see if you guys are adjusting in any way with this, but we know so many people who work 10 and 12-hour shifts, right? And it's just that's burnout city. How long can you do that? This is why people burn out and they end up leaving. Hey, I'm going to go do another job. This is nuts. At what point can we not figure out schedules for opening manager, 8-hour shift, whatever manager you are over here coming in at 2, 8-hour shift maybe. It just seems, and I've been witness to it too, where I'm a manager will be there, is pushing 11 hours. I'm like, dude, please go home. He's like, no, I'm going to stay for another hour. I was like, why? We don't need you here. Yeah. Maybe it's an issue of they feel that responsibility, but also I think it's more of an issue that's what the ownership expects of them, right?
Correct.
Whether you be the executive chef that's putting in those hours. Are you guys doing anything in that realm? Are you looking at that to avoid burnout for people? What are your thoughts on that, on these extended hours in the industry?
It's a huge part of what we look into. I mean, even when I'm hiring somebody or interviewing them, I try to tell them what it's expected. 10 hours is what expected for a shift, 9 to 10 hours. And some days are going to outweigh the others. Some days might be 8 hours. Some days might be 9 or 10. But I never want really anyone working over 10 hours a day or five days a week, essentially.
Yeah.
I always try to guarantee any of my managers to have 2 days off, whether it's me filling in or whether it's my director of ops or anything of that nature. So that's what we hone on a lot. We actually went to a conference in New York recently called the Welcome Conference, and more so the other conferences were focused on like COVID. How do you get out of COVID? How do you stay alive? How do you stay present and relevant? And then this most recent conference was about taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally. And it was a huge conversation about burnout culture. We're like, what can you do to restructure your management team where burnout culture doesn't happen, right? So
can you share any things that stood out from that for you?
Yeah, for sure. Like one thing was happiness, promoting accountability, respectful, be nice to everyone. Structuring your schedule where like, can someone come in later on certain days if they have less admin and then balancing it out a certain other day?
Yeah.
And if you need to come in at 2:00 and the job's still going to get done, come in at 2:00. I don't care. I don't expect you to be there at noon or 1 just because it says it on your schedule.
Right.
Just be honest and transparent about it. Like, hey, I can't get there till 2. I need some more time, or I need to do things that better myself. So that's one thing that we focus on a lot, just in terms of keeping great morale and making sure the retention rate is high as well.
Yeah.
And we want our managers to have 2 days off in a row. So
yeah.
they can take care of their life and have a great quality of life, essentially.
Do you guys do any, like, I know there's always such a focus on hospitality for the customer. Mm-hmm. Do you guys do anything for the employees there?
In terms of, obviously, if you dine at one of our restaurants, you do get a percentage off.
Yeah.
Obviously, for a perk. We also 401k for any full-time employees, which I know a lot of groups don't offer that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And obviously health insurance is great too, health, medical, dental, and vision. And then family meal. I think family meal is a huge part. Like even when I worked for Lettuce, like if you didn't have family meal out on a daily, you would get ripped.
Who would? The kitchen?
If you would get, like if a partner came in and you didn't have family meal ready by like 4:30, you'd be in trouble.
Right.
It was like
that's a standard.
It was a standard. It was an expectation to have family meal out, and I think that's a great thing too. Like, say a person's been running around all day, or they have 2 jobs and they've been at the cafe all day, and they literally have an hour break in between to get themselves ready for their night shift, and then they come into a great meal. You're like, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Little things like that.
For sure. It's just bonding time.
Correct.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always liked that. I've always been attracted to this old school of hospitality of like, Danny Myers and like Paul Greco, some of these old school dudes who would, put out the philosophies of like take care of your people first, and then by default the customers will be taken care of, right?
Correct.
And that really, I just love when I see people who are like making, a lot. I just work in so many places where it's like, show me what you're doing special for the customer, and like really enforcing it on you, and like tell me how you're doing this, and I'm like, that's cool, but then you also get to a certain point. I'm like, cool. Well, how are you doing that for us? Or like, I think it's such a great idea to not just extend that hospitality, obviously to the guests, which is very important, but to the people too that work for you, right, in special ways. So I'm always interested to see how people are doing that, and who do you think kind of shapes your current vision of hospitality, whether it be like any big influential people or people that you've worked with, like. What is your kind of thesis right now these days on hospitality, and if it's changed?
I would say a big influencer is honestly the conference that I went to. Will Gadara is huge. He wrote Unreasonable Hospitality, and he actually has another book coming out that's called Reasonable Hospitality. So that's huge, and Brad is a big proponent of that, and he's very close, and he's in the trenches too, and like the way he preaches hospitality, it goes a long way, and even my director as well, like the drive that they have is like crazy to me. Like every day they're on like 100%. There's no slacking. There's not one day where their hospitality is like at a 1 or 2. It's always at like 100. So I think that's a huge influence on me.
That's like you. I was going to say that's how you are. That's why I see you every day in and out.
Yeah. Man. So like it's a it's a good energizer. Like going to that conference was crazy. It was like at the point where I was like burning out, like working 6-7 days a week, and then Brad taking us out to New York. On him, like he took care of everything was huge. It went a long way, and I hadn't been back to the East Coast in 5-6 years. So
damn, that sounds awesome.
It was awesome.
I want to go
it was
to one
great.
Of those.
Went to a lot of nice dinners, and like it made us even tighter.
Yeah,
me being a part of the executive team was huge. It was a huge promotion for me, and so him taking me out there was like it was great. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I want to shift gears a little bit because I know that there was something I was looking at, and I saw you post about this not too long ago, which I thought was incredible. That you I had a chance to speak to some of the members of the University of San Diego men's basketball team.
Yeah.
And I think the coach and maybe some of their lead players in there. How did that happen? How did that come about?
So it was crazy. A turn of events. Coach Steve Lavin, obviously, he's a very well-known college basketball coach. He coached some high-level teams, like championship teams, and he went into broadcasting too. So his voice is very recognizable. And I think I was at Fort Oak, and he had called the restaurant, and I recognized his voice like immediately. I was like, Coach Steve Lavin's like, yeah, it's me. He's like, how you doing? Yeah. And so he lives by trust, and I didn't know it at the time, but he had taken over the USC basketball team, and so we just became really close. And he was like, dude, you just exude hospitality. I can't understand how you do this. And he knows like how much I do, and like I'm everywhere. He would be at Trust and I would pop up. He would be at Fort Oak and I would pop up. And he's like, dude, how are you in this many places at one time? Like this makes no sense whatsoever. And so his assistant contacted me like a couple months ago, like even before the speech, and he's like, I really want you to do this. And I kind of brushed it off at first because I hate speeches. Like I hate being in front of people. It just drives me nuts. I mean, pre-shifts is one thing, but being in front of people that I don't know, it was like freaking out inside. And so he's like, I really want you to do this. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So we arranged it. It was great timing because I just got back from New York, and I was like super energized and like very like so like ready to go. And so they actually had a dinner. It was all the coaches from the USC basketball team, and it was all the players. So they sat on the patio at Fort Oak, and it was actually like a team dinner essentially. He's like, I really want you to dive in. Like, how do you hire people? What's the hardest part about your job, your background, and where do you see yourself going essentially? And kind of like do like dinner etiquette too, like teach these kids, like tell them how to dine in like a restaurant of this caliber, like what you do, what you shouldn't do, tipping. If you're looking to book a big party, how do you go about that? And how do you run your operations? So it was awesome. And like at the end of it, we took a team picture, and then I think almost the whole team shot me a message on Instagram. Was like, dude, that was crazy. We can't believe like you've done that.
Damn, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was like a big boost for me because like I never thought someone would look at me in that light. So it was amazing.
Yeah. No, congrats. That was huge. I saw it. I was fired up as I saw it. I was like, let's go.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, you have a group of super hungry individuals too, right? Like these
absolutely.
are like they're trying to compete at the highest level that they can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a dream team right there, right? Like being able to coach.
Yeah.
Did you get to talk to Coach a little bit during that time?
I talked to Coach a lot.
Really? Just from him being a regular and you getting
to
know him like that?
I mean, he lives around the corner from Trust, so he's there frequently. We always touch base. He's a big supporter of us too, and he's had team dinners at Rare Society. He's had them at Trust and Fort Oak, so he's honestly a great regular for us, and he's just awesome to be around. His personality exudes like, and just his voice, the way he projects his voice, you can tell like he comes from broadcasting. Just the way he talks is great. Yeah.
Do you ever pick his brain on like what it takes to run a great team?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he actually, after the speech, he was like, whatever you translated from that conference and your work life, it's like goes directly into how like I coach my team. Like morale is great. Be respectful to your teammates. Never forget where you come from. Like I came from a college bar and where I am today. And so I told them like, you could have been on like some terrible AAU team as a player, but you got to learn something from that experience. Whether it's a good experience or a bad experiences you actually probably learn more from, whether in a good experience. Like not everything's perfect, can't be sugar coated, and so never forget where you started.
Right.
Yeah.
Damn, that's awesome, man. All right, let's do this. I'm gonna steal a couple coaches' questions. What's the most difficult part of your job?
Finding balance for myself, I would say. It's hard for me to not check my emails on my day off, which is few and far between right now, but I think I'm doing it for the longevity of it and my retirement eventually. So I'd rather work more than anyone that works for me, essentially. So like I don't want my GMs or my AGMs or my chefs working as much as I do. I'm doing it for my future, and so I can eventually retire. But I would say the hardest part for me is dating life, of course. I don't have a lot of time off.
Because you don't give yourself free time.
So finding that balance and finding a good routine.
Yeah.
Obviously working out and things of that nature, I think that's the hardest part right now.
Taking care of number one.
Of course.
Yep. And then what do you see for yourself moving forward? Like where would you like to see yourself being in 2, 3, 5 years from here?
I think about it a couple of different ways. Honestly thought about consulting a little bit. I mean, I give people advice all the time. I thought about it I don't think that's my true calling, honestly. I think I want to become someone that helps develop and train people.
Yeah. Would you ever want to have your own spot?
I think about that. I go back and forth about it, just the financial drain of it. And honestly, I'd be working more than I already do.
Right.
Because I know I'd be in that spot for a year straight before I even let the reins go.
Yeah.
So that's the only drawback from that. It would be very small if I did do it.
Yeah.
It would be like a 10-person bar and maybe 10 tables, and that's it. Very small operation. So yeah, those are things. And then eventually I want to become partner in a group, and just, I don't know, just have more flexibility.
Yeah.
Now I have a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
Like with my schedule, like some days I go to work at 8. Some days I go to work at 1. Whatever I have, if I have to take care of something personally for myself, I can do that without being stressed and like, I need to be at this restaurant by 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I can bounce around.
So, based on the things that you've learned over these several restaurants that you've worked at and the people that you've worked with, if you could give yourself advice, go back, 5 years. You're looking at yourself, Chris Wood from 5 years ago. What would you tell him?
Enjoy life as much as you can. Take more time off. Take more vacations. We encourage people to take their time off and use your paid time, like use your vacation time, because you never know when you're not gonna be able to use it. So I would give myself more advice is to travel more. Definitely travel more, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's get a trip for you this year, man.
Yeah. Travel more internationally. I've traveled a decent amount of the U.S., but traveling more to Asia, like one of my biggest dreams is to travel to Tokyo.
Oh, nice.
And I still haven't done it, so it's definitely on my radar.
All right, man. I'm going to check back with you in a couple of years and see if you got that trip done. Anything else you want to share? Any other messages that we haven't covered for any of the people watching?
Now you put me on the spot.
I don't know.
I think culture, right?
Yeah.
What we want to touch on. I think culture is what you bring, like your personality, your brand, how you treat people. So obviously be respectful to everyone. Be nice at the end of the day. Someone could have the worst day ever, and you come in, that could make their day. So
I think that's a huge thing with you, man. I've always appreciated. Yeah. And, I've seen you in service, and obviously we worked with the same group before, and I think you even had some manager shifts at Bourne when I was there, maybe, coming in and covering for some people. But, I think that you cannot overstate the importance of being nice to people and making them feel just good about themselves and welcome, because it makes them want to work for you. Correct. Right? Like, it makes people want to do the things that whatever your vision is, it makes people want to fall into that vision. Whereas if people don't appreciate you and they just kind of walk by you, or you don't feel seen by the leaders of the group that you work for, it doesn't really give you a lot of drive to help them fulfill their mission, right? Like, you can come in and still be a great employee, but I think there's definitely a big difference when you have somebody who's happy and carries themselves well, and you want to be around that person and you want to work for that person. Correct. I think that I don't know, and I think that's something that a lot of people overlook, and again, I don't know if that's something you can teach. You're like an ideal person because you've obviously got the charisma down first. It comes naturally to you, and then now it seems that you've learned all the technical side of the operations. Like a lot of aren't those like two different sides of the brain? I feel like a lot of times people are saying, well, you either have one or the other, right? You have this person who's really good at numbers, but maybe they're not really good with people, or they're great with people, but then they just don't understand the numbers game too much. So. Yeah. It's finding that little sweet spot.
Yeah, you got to have a balance of both. I mean, I always tell this people when I'm training them, like, when you walk in the door, the first thing you do is you say hi to everybody.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're a dishwasher. I don't care if they're a line cook or a bartender. You say hi to everybody when you walk in the door and before you leave. That's very important. It goes a long way.
I love that. You know what? They had that at Ironside, actually. That was a thing at Ironside when I worked there. So before Bourne was open, I, obviously everything was getting pushed back and delayed. Yeah. So they just put me down on the floor randomly, just at Ironside, and kind of learned their operations there. But I was there for a couple months, and I remember that was one of the first things that the manager told me. I was like, listen, if anybody you come into eye contact with, like, go say hi to that person. Yep. I was like, that's awesome. Anybody who's in like I forget exactly how they framed it, but it was like basically like a 5-foot radius of yours, like as you walk into the buildings, like make sure you say hi. So I come in, and this is like my first week there, and everybody's like, hi, how are you doing? Like, hey, how's it going, man? I was like, damn, this place is awesome. Like, people are so cool here, and I just felt super welcome. I was like, dude, honestly, that's funny. You reminded me of that. Like, that was one of the I always remember that as like, damn, I gotta do that wherever I go, because that's it just sets the tone, right? Like, why would you want to walk in a place that's like the employees aren't even saying hi to each other, or I don't know, it's such, or even to a business, right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves in general. It's like I walk into a business and nobody says hi to you.
Yeah,
I go to this gym.
Crazy to me.
I go to this gym in this neighborhood, in my neighborhood where I'm not sorry, I'm not trying to blast anybody here, but it's just such an obvious example. It's like I've been going there for years, right? And it's always the same thing at this one location where it's literally the person, whoever's at the front desk, has just got their face down, they're looking at their phone, and whatever, it's fine. Like I go in, I check in, put my finger on there, check in, go do my thing. And there was this girl there a month ago. And she's at the front desk. And I go to check in. She's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good. How are you?" She's like, "What are you working out today?" I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go do arms." She's like, "Right on, cool. Have a great workout." I was like, "Oh my god, that was amazing." It was like such an opposite feeling of what I normally get. And then on the way up, the GM dude was hanging around the front desk. Was like, "Hey man, I gotta tell you, I've been coming here for like 5 years. I know you can't notice, but you coming here for 5 years, and this is literally the first time that somebody's engaged me." Or even giving me like a thoughtful hello coming into this building. I just want to say I really appreciate it. I've worked in hospitality for like almost 2 decades, and I think it goes a long way. And it's like, oh, right on, man, thank you, But and then I've been the last several months it's been the same thing. Nobody says anything, but it's such a big pet peeve of mine. I
don't think people realize that hospitality translates into a lot of businesses.
Yeah,
Fortune 500 company, a bank, a gym, a grocery store. It translates everywhere.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking about that the other day too? I was at Trader Joe's, and I just started going to Trader Joe's. I've always been going to Vaughn's. Yeah. Dude, everybody's so nice at Trader Joe's. I wanna like talk to the director of ops or whoever's running Trader Joe's. Like they're doing something different. Yeah. Dude, I go to Vaughn's and Sprouts, like nobody cares. I mean, there's some friendly people. Yep. I'm trying to put a blanket statement, but there's obviously something different happening at that store. Forgive me because I'm totally a newbie to Trader Joe's. I've been going there like the last 6 months only. I don't know what I was doing before. Right. But every time I go, no matter what counter I go to or whoever I'm talking to, or even if I stop and ask somebody, "Hey man, where's this thing?" They stop what they're doing. It's like, "I got you, man. Come over here. Yep. Let me show you exactly where it is. How's your day going?" Like there's something different going on over there, and I think it's very noticeable, right?
That's funny you say that. I went to Trader Joe's a couple days ago to get lunch, and I was wearing a Trust shirt, and she was like, "Hey, how's your day going?" I was like, "It's going well." She's like, "You work for Trust?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Do you love it?" That's the first thing she said. I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy." It was great.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. I went to the restaurant. They're like, "You just went to Trader Joe's?" It's like, "Yeah." This lady literally was like, "Do you love it?" It's like, I don't know if she was trying to pry, like she was trying to pry there, but it just went a long way,
All right, we got to get the whoever's responsible for the culture of Trader Joe's on this podcast. If you guys know who it is, you got to put us in touch, please.
I mean, a lot of people hate on Chick-fil-A, but their hospitality is great too.
Okay, it's been a while. Man. I need to go back there. I need to pop in. What do they do great? What are they doing over there?
They're just super nice. They're just always vibrant. They're always like very upbeat. I mean, it definitely goes a long way in their training and their culture. You can just tell. I know a kid I went to college with. He actually he owns a Chick-fil-A, and he had to go to a Chick-fil-A college. So they basically go to school to become an owner of a Chick-fil-A.
Damn.
And their company culture has to be great. I mean, they obviously close one day a week, so that helps too.
That's so yeah. I think I heard that before too. That's so interesting, man. Like, there's something really special there, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, again, like it's fast food. Not to like, disparage anybody who's in the fast food industry, but you would think that that's again one other job where somebody's just going to come in, they're going to collect the check, and they're going to get out of there, right? But if you can train even at that level to somebody who's just actually living in a very happy culture, on paper you should be able to do that in any establishment, right? That's so interesting.
Yeah,
cool.
And that goes for us too. Sorry touching it. Like closing one day a week goes a long way for anybody.
Yeah.
So we make sure we close one day a week so we can guarantee a day off for anybody.
Right.
And so I think that not being so greedy and caught up in like we have to make sales, we have to get this volume, or like for instance when we had that hurricane warning recently, like we closed all restaurants just for the sake of the safety of our employees. We're like, I don't care if it doesn't happen, we just need to close because we know this is something on the radar. People are scared to like travel. And it's like little things like that. People look at it and they're like, yeah, we need to close.
Yeah,
we don't care.
Step aside of the restaurants and not close.
Yeah, exactly.
People setting up. Yeah, man, that's so interesting. Well, Chris Wood, I appreciate your time, man. Where can people find you? What's your Instagram? Is that the best place to reach out to you?
Instagram, cwood804.
Okay.
But you can find me in any of the Trust restaurants, except for the Rares right now. Eventually, hopefully, I'll help out with the Rare Society. I do on the back end sometimes, but working service at the Rare Society is definitely something I want to look forward to in the future.
Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure absolutely having you today. It's been a pleasure being in your network too, man. I'm just super happy seeing you grow and can't wait to see what you do next, man. So yeah, thanks for your time here today, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.